Welcome to the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. I'm Eric Charlson, and this is episode 16, which closes out season 1. Today's episode is brought to you by Timberline at Mount Hood. Timberline's Spring Pass is on sale now for $109 and allows you to shred until May 31st at North America's only 12-month-a-year resort. I've been going to Timberline since 1990 because it fucking rules. Their dedication to their park and grooming is unsurpassed. So if you live anywhere near Mount Hood, plan a trip now. They just had 5 feet of snowfall last week. Their spring parks are bumping and the lift lines are non-existent. For more information, visit timberlinelodge.com.
Yeah, I didn't start even riding till I was 65 years old.
The first board I rode was this plastic Sims Lonnie Tops with a skate deck.
Snowboarding is exactly the same as it used to be. It's just...
Dude, I can't wait to go snowboarding.
You almost don't get an appreciation for it until you actually ride with someone like that.
I was the only one able to ride. That's it.
Every single change each year made me a better snowboarder.
I was top 10 in half-pipe against Craig and my heroes.
When we stacked hay bales and stuff and had this little quarter pipe.
That's so fucking rad.
My first pro snowboard was an Avalanche Kick 175 Damian Sanders Pro model. I'd just seen Snowboarders in Exile, and my local shop had one for sale for $425 with bindings. I was 16, 5'9", and 120 pounds. The board was as tall as I was and didn't flex, but I loved that board so much I even slept with it in my bed. I rode my first chairlift on that board later that year. Damian was a true rock star snowboarder, complete with 90s punk vampire style, a penthouse playmate wife, and the ability to go huge by today's standard on equipment that was practically homemade. In my humble opinion, Damian was the best snowboarder of that era, and the snowboarders I talked to for the podcast agree. He was a fucking badass. He pushed the limits of snowboarding far past where anyone had gone up to that point. It would take a couple years for the industry to catch up to Damian. Calling Damian was surreal, and I'm glad we have this interview to finish off season 1 of the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast.
Hello, this is Damian.
Hey, Damian, it's Eric calling, man. How you doing?
Eric, I'm not usually this hard to reach. I don't know what was going on there, but life is busy. It's been crazy. At the same time as you called, we were moving houses. My fitness equipment business is booming, or starting to take off, I should say. The X Bar, and then, of course, Monster Stage, which I was in Vegas for. Monster Stage is the other company that I own, which is all production stuff. So I've been out in Las Vegas every weekend for this big show. And then we come back, and basically by the time you're recouped, it's Wednesday or Tuesday. And then you're going right back out on Thursday, Friday. So it's been a whirlwind. Nothing to do with snowboarding, but completely insane.
Yeah, you've always been a bit of a business guy, I guess, hey?
Yeah, sort of. I guess back in the days, it was more just doing what I loved.
For fun, right. Yeah, I watched the Powder and Rails, the Vice interview the other day, too.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's so good. That catapult thing, I don't remember where I first saw the catapult on the beach. I think it was in the Creatures of Habit.
It was in Creatures of Habit or Krusty Demon. When Krusty Demons was happening in Creatures of Habit, we were just building skits every day. Like, we were building snowboards with rocket launchers on them and stuff like that. Just stupid stuff for the movies. Yeah. Right. And so we had nothing to do with time and money, so we were just making up all kinds of stupid stuff, and that was one of the worst ideas we ever had. Okay. When I first did it, we put it in my backyard, and we put a washing machine on it. The washing machine went over the backyard fence and into the neighboring yard, and so we were like, get this thing to the beach, and we did, and Wade got messed up and ended up in the hospital. The girls were crying, the people on the beach were pissed. It was a funny scene, and it made for great video. So.
And you guys are trying to pack it up and get the hell out of there.
Oh yeah. Dana Nicholson was just stoked on the footage. As soon as he got it, he was like, hell yeah, someone almost died. But that happened weekly back then. I mean, that was the 1990s in Huntington Beach, and everything went back then. It was just complete chaos. Because we had all those pros living around us. Everybody was kind of in the same scene. It was Krusty Demons, Snowboarders in Exile, the Creatures of Habit. It was all happening at the same time, and everybody lived. All the people, you lived in Tahoe or you lived in Huntington, and that was where all the pros lived for every sport. So it was a nonstop party and just stupid shit happening daily.
I imagine there'll be kids who fall in love with snowboarding and then kind of go back and watch videos and stumble onto guys like you. Like someone learning guitar would be like, oh my God, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, these guys are so
exactly.
awesome. And their equipment was they didn't have any of the luxuries that we had. Look at this guy.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what happened with Facebook. Is Facebook has been a revival for everybody. Like it was a lull there for like 10 years where we just kind of disappeared. I did my own thing with Club Rubber and had all this fun partying and stuff, and I just disappeared from the snowboard scene one day because I basically got hurt and hung it up, and then went on to do something completely different. So unless you were like hanging out with us, nobody. I almost like was where are they now? I just disappeared and did my own thing. So the snowboard world forgot about me really quick. And then Facebook came around, and then everybody started talking again. And so in the last like 5 years, there's been this huge revival of the whole snowboard world, which has been a blast to be a part of. It's very much like, being in Poison in the 80s, and then all of a sudden Bret Michaels was huge, popular again. All of a sudden he's in the mix, It was kind of just like that for snowboarding.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. You have fucking epic style. When you go back and see Exile, and you're just free riding it. Bachelor in one of the scenes, I'm like this is still
cool. I appreciate that.
Awesome riding by today's standards, even with the tiny stance.
Yeah, that's the funny part is watching that 17-inch stance, and I look at it, and it's so goofy looking now, but at the time it felt right because we didn't know any better. Right. Nobody thought to go like 22 inches. I wish I would have been somewhere in the middle because it looked kind of, and my style would have been that much cooler if I would have been standing right. But the boots themselves, like I touched on it in that interview, the boots made me such a stronger rider because it'd be like putting a skier in soft boots, and he would be all wobbly, or like when you go rent ice skates, when you go ice skating with your girlfriend and you rent ice skates and they're like pieces of shit that have been worn 1,000 times. So there's no strength in your riding, and so you give that to a pro hockey player and he's going to go, what is this? It's a joke, and so the hard boots made me feel like I was that much stronger, and no one understood that except for the few people that rode them, Tom Bird, Jim Zellers, Dana. And Tom's a great example of a very powerful rider, and he was always on hard boots, and same with Jim. But without them, like when I switched over to soft boots, that was the death of me. I could tweak a lot harder in the air, because there was no boundaries of how much I could tweak. But you come down, or even just like bouncing turns through chopped up moguls, hard boots were that's why I could ride the way I rode.
Like, did you have the feeling that snowboarding was going to be massive back then? Like, did you kind of see the future?
I did in the very beginning. Like that first 10 years was like, oh, we're on to something so cool. And that was what was so fun about being part of the very first part of snowboarding. I mean, there was literally 1,000 snowboarders in the world and most of us knew each other, Either you were really good or you just were obscure, because you all ended up at the same competitions. And the competitions were a joke, but it was a great place for us to see that there's other guys just like us. I knew every pro in the world, and we all met at every competition. And that was fun for, 10 years of that shit. It was a blast. I didn't ever see it going like Olympics and the way it's turned out. I just didn't even speculate that it'd become that big of a sport. Now it's just part of life. I mean, you don't even think of snowboarding. It didn't exist at one time. So when we were like living in Tahoe, and I'd see a guy ride by with a snowboard on his strapped to his roof, he didn't have snowboard racks. It was always makeshift stuff that somebody had basically built just for that one snowboard. And then you'd have to flag him down and talk about where you rode and which boards you're riding, bindings you're riding, because everything was like, we're building this shit as it's happening. And nobody knew like what the next step was going to be. I thought hard boots were going to take off and be like everybody's going to click on, get off a lift and click in like I did, and it just never did.
Europe was on your side with that. Europe really was hard boot dominated right straight through till mid '90s, early '90s.
Yeah. There was other pros that really rode hard boots, like no other tweakers, I should say. Everybody was like a racer, like Jose Fernandez type guys. And that European scene was not the American cool Squaw Valley scene. That's why it was only me and our 5 guys that were doing it.
Yeah, no, even the people who loved your riding would harp on you for the hard boots. I know that.
Yeah, they all thought, you're going to be so much better in soft boots. And I switched over to soft boots, and I think when I blew out my knee, I was riding soft boots, and that not necessarily the problem. I went way too big for the jump, but that was the Blackcomb wind lip, which has a horrible landing but a great takeoff.
Oh my God, the wind lip is the one that took you out, because I religiously watch mostly Snowboarders in Exile, and then I also watch Western Front.
I think Western Front is where they realized they had something, like it was worth making another movie and putting some money into it, and then I think they got some small sponsors, and Exile was the game changer. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a totally different genre of movie too, right? Like
he did such a good job. At the time, we had no money.
Well, how involved were you with Exile? Like, were you in the editing room with those guys?
No, not at all. No, I never saw one part of that. It was just go out there and ride every day, and we were just, I guess, hard to explain. But when you're in that, and we didn't know that we were that good or that we were the best at freestyle. We were just like, let's go out there and rock some jumps, and hopefully we're cooler than the guys on the East Coast or something, or doing cooler tricks. We heard those great jumps at Bachelor or the Windlip in Canada, and so we didn't realize that we were doing what we were doing until that movie hit, and then it's like, wow, everybody loves it. Yeah. And that was really cool.
I moved out west because of you saying, if there's one jump in the world, it's worth driving all the way.
Oh, no way. Rad.
And then I got there and I hit the Windlip, and it was so big that, yes, it was amazing, but it was so flat. The landing was so bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that was at the time, I was, 19 years old, so I would have killed myself to show off. So hitting that, and getting literally 20 feet high and coming down on not too good of a transition was just like, who cares? I'll wipe out on my ass and do it again like 20 times. And then, so that fateful day, probably 1992, I think it was, and I think it was me and Sean Johnson were having a big air contest, and he kept going 10 feet higher up the hill and putting on his board. I'm like, this little fucker. And I had to go 10 feet higher than him, and there was a ton of people watching. And so we just bombed it. We would jump, turn, and bomb it straight for that Windlip, and it didn't matter what the landing was like. We were just going to get higher than each other. And he pushed me to the absolute limit, and I went higher than him, and it came down, and my knee went the wrong way, and tore every ligament in my knee. And then I bounced down that hill because it went forever. Yeah. And I couldn't stop rolling and tumbling because I'm going so fast with a blown out knee, and I'm just going like a snowball down this hill, screaming, holding my knee. And I remember looking back up, and it looked like a mile where the people were, and then my knee's blown out, and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do now? And so it took me a half an hour to hike with one foot up to the base of the jump. And then I had to get out of that area. You know where it is. It's in BFE, and I had to snowboard backwards all the way to the lodge, to my car, because of my front leg was the leg that blew out, so I had to take all the pressure off. So I'm trying to use it as a skag to get down the mountain, and there's those long cat tracks that were just forever, just to get back to the car. And then I hobbled to the car with the help, and then got back to the lodge. Oh, it sucked. And then I had to drive home to California, so it was like a 23-hour drive back to my house with a blown out knee. And that's the kind of shit you do when you're young and broke. I couldn't imagine. Right now, I get helicoptered out of there and taken straight to the hospital. not then. Long before you knew about Vicodin or anything like that, so you just deal with the pain.
Yeah, that's the worst. Where did you grow up before you moved to Tahoe?
Well, I lived in San Jose when I was young, so I grew up being a skate punk in San Jose. I was only 13 years old when I moved. BMX and skateboarding were my life. My dad got a job opportunity to transfer. He was working for Pacific Bell, and so we were able to move to Arnold, which is this little hick town. It's very close to a place called Bear Valley, California. That's the local ski resort, basically. So when we moved, I was like, okay, we're going to build skateboard ramps in the woods. I'm going to have bike tracks, and I did all that in the summer. But then winter comes around real quick, and so I was a skier at the time. And then Chris, my brother, invented Avalanche Snowboards at this exact time. So this would have been 1983, I think, 1982. He gave me the first board. I remember it was like that one Christmas where you're obviously the most important kid and you get everything, the most fun to buy for, I should say. So I was like getting skateboards, snowboards, skis, all on the same Christmas, and the snowboard was like the best present I could ever got. So we went local that next morning, because Christmas we celebrated at night, opened all the presents, got up early, drove to the ski resort, and of course we weren't allowed to ride there, but there was all the mountains around it. And so Chris and I, were like on the side of the road, pulled off in the parking lot, and it was like makeshift bindings, little snap-on buckles, Fastex buckles, complete piece of shit, with a swallowtail and fins. The board actually had fins, that stuck down an inch, because we thought we had to have fins or you'd just spin in circles. That's how naive we were. Right. So there was a good foot of powder, and it was 200 or 300 foot long slope, and I stood up, turned, went like 50 feet of just straight, and then started bouncing turns just like I would on my skateboard, and I couldn't believe how easy it was, like it was meant to be. So I made probably 10, 15 turns on my very first run and ate shit, and then I was just freaking, ran back up to the top of the hill, did it all day long. We just took turns riding this board up and down the hill. That was the rest was history. I never touched skis. I used to take my skis just because I could ride the ski resort, but I'd hide my skis because I didn't have a locker or money for a locker, so I just hide them in the trees, and then I'd go snowboarding all day.
Nice. So your relationship with Chris he's your brother?
Yes.
And did you ever have any time where you were competing for Avalanche where he was like, dude, you only got fifth? We need some first
Oh,
place.
no. Yeah.
Trophies.
I was expected to get fifth. Fifth or worse was my best. No one ever expected me to win. That was just not my thing. It was just like go out there and show off and be the craziest kid, and I love that part of it. That's what was so fun about it too. Is I just got to do what I wanted to do, and the sport was so new that your rankings didn't matter much.
Right.
It mattered to Craig and a couple other people, or to Burton, I should say.
Absolutely.
But to West Coast snowboard rats, like that didn't matter at all. All we cared about was getting in the magazine or hitting the biggest jump and everybody talking about it,
Yeah.
And this was long before any of the ski resorts. We got Donner Ski Ranch and Boreal, and that was really it, Boreal. So we were riding those every day. I remember meeting up with the Rat Pack. It was like 12 of us that we'd meet at the bottom of the lift, and everybody would say within one run you'd kind of find all your friends because everybody knew which lift to be at for the first couple hours. And then we'd take off and just ride all over these mountains.
Who would be in that Rat Pack? Anybody that listeners would
yeah, Sean Palmer, Chris Roach, Sean Palmer, Tucker Franzen, Tom Burt, Jim Zellers, Dana Nicholson, Bonnie Zellers. I mean, there was like a whole bunch of names. Terry Kidwell, Glenn Plake was the one skier.
Yep.
Mohawk Glenn Plake was always with us because he was the one skier that was more like us than he was a skier. And he was awesome. He was totally funny, and he was just like us. And the only thing different was he was on skis, and we accepted him
that's
into the
pretty
group.
Forward thinking for back then, hey?
Yeah. But actually, Glenn came a little later, though, because Glenn came when Squaw Valley opened up, because Glenn was always allowed to ride the Boreal Mountains, and we were always banned from anything, from the big ones. So Donner Ski Ranch and Boreal were just like groundbreaking for us, because they would actually, they were so small, and they risked the lawsuits at the time, because lawsuits were a huge deal back then.
Totally.
And snowboards were a piece of the shit. I mean, I understand now, looking back, that they were right for not allowing us, because our shit was such a mess. Our equipment was so bad that boards would fall off your feet on the chairlift, and fly down and take off down the hill by themselves like a torpedo. And one person I remember got killed from a flyaway board, it's like in Colorado or something, and that went across the whole ski industry. Like, snowboards are bad.
And that's where those leash laws came from.
Yeah.
We got a leash.
And the leashes were the silliest thing, because the problem was your board, the binding would break off the board, and then your leashes connect to your binding, so it was completely it was retarded. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So we were all, and we understood that, but it was just like, okay, appease them and put on this stupid leash.
Yeah.
And that worked until we actually, I mean, even now when I look at the bear trap systems on a snowboard, I think it's archaic.
Me too.
And it should have come so much farther. Even when I switched over to soft boots, I used to sit there in my garage and I'd grind out the base plates for those click-in bindings by Shimano.
Yep.
And I made my entire whole custom boot fit the Shimano. So I had a soft boot that fit a click-in binding before Shimano did. I was doing that also with my Koflax. I was grinding them all out and using the Shimano plates, and putting like the 3 giant bolts. I had washers in my boots so they wouldn't break. It was so ridiculous, but it worked. And so when I get off the lift and just click in, I'd see everybody looking at my feet like, what the hell did he just do?
How do you do that?
As he's riding away,
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
And especially the Europeans. I remember being in competitions, and I'd see all those Europeans standing around studying my setup because it was all homemade. And they're like, how is he just clicking right in with hard boots and blah, blah. Oh, it was funny.
Yeah, so what was it like competing? You competed and then...
Yeah, I was never big on it, and I hated the pressure. I would much rather stand up on top of a cliff and launch that than to be at the top of like the gates, dropping in on a small or a border cross.
Right.
I just never felt like I didn't have that competitive spirit of like I got to get in front of this guy and knock him over to get in first place. And so I would actually ride timid compared to how I would normally ride, just to like, I don't want to offend anybody on the racetrack. So I don't want to get in your way if you're going to take first. And so I remember like letting people pass me because I was too nice of a guy.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's ridiculous. So the only thing I cared about was dropping into that half pipe and showing off, And God, when I watched videos of the old days, we were so horrible. I mean, we barely even got above the lip, and we were like barely grabbing our board. It was just a mess compared to like the professionalism that is now.
There's a few shots from back then, though, like of you in that dirty Japan half pipe.
Yeah,
above the lip, and you're and knowing how big that pipe was, which is tiny. The fact that you got that much air and that much style, dude. I know what you're talking about. Though. Those old competitions are like, even watching, Craig Kelly's World Cup winning run, you're kind of like, oh wow, it used to be that.
Yeah, that was a World Cup ring. Compared to what you see now, and these guys look like robots, just dying, 20 feet out.
So
triple twist.
How much is that in your life now? You sit with your daughter and watch the Olympics and tell her like,
yeah,
I used to do this.
Yeah, well, she's 7 now, so she's starting to get it that I used to be in magazines and on TV and stuff. So it's so funny because she'll brag about it to her friends when I'm not watching, or she doesn't think I'm watching, and it's just so hilarious.
I feel like there were two Damians. And I feel like the Avalanche Kick Damian was like this very wholesome, neon happy. And then the Damian Dagger Damian was like a vampire, leather jacket, penthouse pets, wife, and like a partier, like crazy. Was there?
That's exactly how it happened. Yeah.
It
was like all through high school and stuff. My friends used to all get stoned, and I'd be so pissed because all I wanted to do was go be physical. Let's go ride, let's go skate, and they'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna get stoned," and just sit around, and I'd go freaking nuts because I didn't have anybody who was on my wavelength. Like I wasn't a stoner, wasn't a partier, and then. I guess it all happened around the time I moved to Southern California, and I got wrapped up in that scene. I met Brandy. We got married a couple months later, all over L.A. doing those photo shoots for her, and so we had met all these like rock star types and ended up at these rock star parties. And then I was just like, oh my God, this is the life. I was in the middle of this craziness, and that was at the exact same time I was like in love with Danzig and Pantera and all these bands, and so
I made a connection the other day that it took me a really long time to make this connection. But did you see Lost Boys like in the theater?
Yeah, about 1,000 times.
and then like because you got the Lost Boys haircut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't put.
I had that from the beginning. I almost swear that he stole it from me. I had that ridiculous hairdo for since I was like 13 years old. Right. And the funny thing is, and here's a funny story about that, is right when the Lost Boys was huge, I pulled up in a traffic light in Los Angeles, and I'm going from one place to the other for who knows what. My hair's up like it always was, and I look next to me, and Kiefer Sutherland's in the car right next to me, and he looks at me, and he looks like this little like half smile, and I'm like, that's right, buddy. And we both like go different ways, and like, that was my Kiefer Sutherland sighting.
That's amazing.
And he probably thought I just copied his whole style. I'm like, oh, that's so funny.
So then you were still riding the 175 Kick in exile. When did the Dagger come out?
Dagger was, I would almost call it a mistake because the way the Kick rode for me was like it matched my style. It was so old-fashioned compared to like all these boards were coming out with huge camber and side cut. And we thought we had to keep up with the Joneses, and so Avalanche had to come out with this new, and we never really understood the physics behind it. We were just trying to make cool stuff. So my brother Chris was never like a professional ski designer like Burton would have, or Rossignol was making snowboards and all these different brands. So when we came out with the Dagger, it was like, it was part of my image at the time, all deathly in black. And then the side cut was ridiculous, and I swear it made my riding worse because the Kick was almost completely opposite. And then it had that camber, which I didn't like either, and so...
I think the Kick was flat.
The Kick was flat, yeah. It was before anybody had invented all that great stuff, and so I swear I rode better, 100 times better on my Kick than I did on my Dagger. But it was all around the same time I bought my knee, too.
Yeah, so you blow out your knee, the board you're riding, you're kind of like, and you're getting all this pressure to ride soft boots, and you try those, and you're like, hurts.
So I blow out my knee, and then I blow out my knee in Canada. I go home, and I have full reconstructive surgery. It's my front knee, so it's my power knee, basically. So I did 7 months of rehabilitation, did all the stuff you're supposed to do. I was in that rehabilitation or rehab for the whole 7 months, and the season starts again, and I go riding at Bear, and there's big jumps all over, but they're all park jumps, and so I go off this huge jump, do a big old 720, come down in that full rotation spin, and just rip my knee out all over again. Like I heard it just go rip, and so I'm laying on the ground screaming, hold my knee again, going, just no fucking way. I just spent 7 months of my life rehabbing this thing, and it's gone again. So that's when kind of like the party scene happened. That's like I had a lot of free time because, and then. So I went back to the doctor, and they just did a whole bunch of, orthoscopic, and cleaned it all up. Said it didn't tear completely, but then every time I went off a jump, my knee would pop out. And so I have Dana up on the mountain pulling on my knee, putting it back in place, of all people, Dr. Dana. So we had the system, where we'd like brace me up against something, and he would yank on my knee, and that would release the cartilage that had flipped over, which would made it, too painful to even put any pressure on. So every time I went off a jump, this happened. Every serious jump, and it's like, this is just bullshit. And so I wasn't smart enough to go get it refixed properly and do that all over again. So I just started partying. And And I was getting paid a fortune at the time by all my sponsors, and all they cared about that I was still the same, crazy Damian. And for like 5 or 6 years, I milked that. I was getting paid a bunch every month, and my check basically came in, and we were like, let's go party again. Let's go to Los Angeles, do all the stuff we did.
Yeah, so I remember the early Riders Poll stuff, because there was a year that you won for most extreme where...
I didn't even ride, yeah.
You didn't ride the third year, and you still won. And I was like, A, I thought you deserved it, so I'm not saying that. But B, I was like, that dude is so much better than everybody else that I can't even believe he doesn't even have to ride. He still... wins.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like, well, I was able to fake it for a while. Like I had other sponsors that were coming in, like paying me, who didn't understand that I was just partying with their money and having a good time. And it's mostly Japanese companies because they weren't there every day. They just thought they were paying for the idea of Damian and not what I was actually doing.
Well, yeah.
So
I'm sure they still got their money's worth. Kids are
I remember going over there. I had a blown out knee right before I went to Japan, and the trip was already booked. I had to be there for 2 weeks, and I didn't even touch a snowboard. I just walked around and signed autographs and stuff, and it was just like, holy shit, this is not what I should be doing.
Was there some guilt that went along with that, or?
Oh yeah, there was big time guilt. I felt so bad for taking their money, but at the time, I was like, I thought I was starting this rock band at the time, this gothic rock band, and we didn't know how to play any instruments. We were just like had the look, and that was about it.
Oh my god! What was
it was like Spinal Tap, The Hunger.
I love it.
I often think that, like, what if we had the avenues or the mediums, I guess, to promote what people have now. I mean, with Facebook and Instagram and all these ridiculous ways, YouTube, we didn't have any of those options, and we still got famous doing what we were doing. Yeah. So could you imagine what it would be like if we had those avenues then to promote stupid shit we were doing? Because basically we were doing stuff that Jackass was doing long before Jackass was doing it, and then they got MTV behind them and all these different huge ways to promote to the world.
I feel like there's hundreds of people out there that feel that way.
And they were basically just doing crusty demons and creature habit skits, but they were getting a world to watch them instead of just our little clique.
Well, you mentioned Sean Johnson. The whiskey movies gained so much momentum. And if you go back and watch the first couple, the riding is so bad that it's unwatchable.
Yeah.
And then by the third one, they're like, hey, look, we can ride too,
Yeah.
I think they were getting sick of being those guys. And then you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Then Jackass comes out and they're like, God damn it, we should have just kept being those guys.
Yeah. Who would ever guess that was going to be the thing that cashed in?
Yeah, because Sean Johnson was an amazing rider early on. Like, so amazing.
Yeah, that's where we used to ride together. It was at Craig Kelly's snowboard camp. That's where the big jump happened. That's where he was there all the time. We had a blast riding together.
Tim Wendell talked about the early days of snowboard camps with Craig Kelly. It's absolutely fascinating to me that they went to a snowboard camp together over in Austria, and that gave them the idea to come back here. And then
we should do one. Oh, wow, how cool. Tim had Mount Hood, right? So Mount Hood camp, I think Craig had the whiskey camp.
That's right.
I remember waiting all year for that. I had so much fun in summer. I was so solar powered, and I hated snowy days. I just wanted to be out there riding that slush, and it was so slushy and awesome. And so Craig basically had me there just to be the show off. I didn't really know what I was teaching. It's like, who wants to go jump with Damian? All the kids, we want to go jump with Damian. And all I do is go find a kicker and show off. And all these kids really wanted to see, and I'd show them, here's how you do this move or that move. But really, I was just having a good time showing off.
Oh my God! I had my heart set on Craig Kelly's camp. You would have been there. I would have got to meet you, jump with you. I would have freaked out. But I rode up the chairlift with Tim, and he said, oh, don't go to Craig's camp. Come to my camp. And so I told my parents, oh my God, I've been invited to this camp by Tim Wendell. He's a world champion.
Oh, cool.
And they sent me from Canada down to...
Oh, and it could have all been different.
You know what? I loved it, though.
I never went to the Mount Hood camp. I just saw a ton of pictures.
It was so much
I don't know which
fun.
one was better, but...
You know what?
It was.
I'm sure 6 at one, half dozen the other. It's snowboarding in the summer. It's slush. It's big jumps. It's all these pros. It's amazing.
And what I loved is I took my snowboard, my skateboard, my mountain bike, and my motorcycle all in my truck. And so when you were riding Craig's camp, I don't know how we had the energy, but we'd wake up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning and wouldn't go to sleep till midnight after every single minute of that day, for 18 hours was just nonstop physical activity. From the snowboard, from snowboarding, I went straight to the skate park, and then I went up the road and rode my motorcycle for 2 hours, and then mountain bike jumps all over, or whatever we had, BMXers at the time, and then barely slept, went to town, partied. It was 10 o'clock at night when it was getting dark, so it was just like, God, you had so much to do. So I think I did 3 years. I think the third year with Craig's camp is when I blew out my knee, and that was the last time I went up there.
That was it.
But God, that was fun.
Yeah, and how did that affect your winter riding? Of course, it gave you confidence going off of cliffs and jumps and stuff.
Yeah, you know, when you don't get hurt and when you've never been hurt, you're invincible until you do, you know. And so I was so invincible, like there was nothing that could hurt me, and no matter what I was riding.
There's a few things in Exile that you land so flat on that it's like, and
yeah,
you go so big, like so big to flat that it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I had steel legs at the time, and they were skinny little bird legs, and they would stick up to anything. And just because I was so hyperactive as a kid, I never stopped.
So after Exile, was it apparent to you? Like, did other people come up and say, like, "Oh my God, you killed that movie"?
Yeah, you know what? It was definitely a rock star moment, and it happened as it was the Action Sports trade show in San Diego when they did the huge premiere, and no one had seen a snowboard movie worth a squat at the time. Mm-hmm. So they packed like 500 people into this auditorium or this banquet hall, and everybody's like, "Oh, Snowboard Exile, what's it going to be?" And Western Front was okay, but it wasn't groundbreaking, and it was like the first time you saw, you know, the first time you saw a backflip on a motorcycle, you know, it was like, how the hell? People couldn't comprehend the shit we were doing. To us, it was just, let's go ride in Tahoe and film it. And I hadn't even seen it yet, so it was so fun to watch it transpire. And, you know, you get to see it all come together, and they did such a good job at the time of editing. Yeah. I watch it now, and it's so slow, and it's almost painful to watch.
It's so slow, but it's so, you know what? It's such a nostalgic piece of my childhood.
Yeah,
like I said, I know every quote from everybody in that.
Yeah,
I know the whole thing.
Some of that stupid shit was so funny. I mean, listening to Dave talk about his car and Steve Graham, such a character, and he was like a Muppet.
Because that movie is one of those buddy movies where it's like you and Steve kind of vying for the thing, and he gets his piece too with that big cliff, and you're like, yeah.
Is that when we went off side by side?
You go side by side.
I eat shit.
You eat a little bit of shit, and he just nails it, and he went bigger. So it was like, underdog gets one, man, totally. Oh.
And you know what is funny about that is I was going to backflip that cliff, and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be the killer shot. Like, this is going to change my life if I backflip this cliff. And he's like, no, dude, let's do doubles. And some reason he talked me out of doing the backflip, and who knows what would have happened. I might have over-rotated and landed on my head because it was huge.
It was
massive. And so we went side by side, you know, and I wish to this day I would have backflipped it because the cliff that I did backflip, you know, now to today's standards, it's nothing. At the time, it was like groundbreaking, but it wasn't the awesome looking cliff that one was, you know.
It wasn't as big as that, right? You're right. You're absolutely.
It certainly wasn't as big, and there wasn't as much rock involved, you know. So to like fly up rocks would have just been so cool at the time. That was the shot that changed my life, I would say. Like that was the shot that nobody could believe at the time, and it's so funny because now it's like whatever, people were flipping shit left and right, and at the time no one had done that. You know, it was like Kerry Hart doing it on a motorcycle. At the time, it was incredible to see a motorcycle do a backflip. Now it's like triple backflips are going to become the normal.
Yeah, who are the guys that you love? Christian Hosoi, like Terje? Do you like guys that go humongous are your guys, right?
Well, at the time we only could follow skateboarding. There was no snowboard heroes at the time because I guess we were kind of them. We were so young and it was such a brand new sport. But I followed Christian Hosoi, Lester Kasai, Lance Mountain, the whole Bones Brigade team. But Christian had that style and flair that no one else had, and he was he was exactly what I wanted to be like. So I would say, and he was only a couple of years older than me at the time, you know, as we were all young. But I think he lived in L.A. and he had that whole look and feel that just, you know, the shirt hanging off the back of his pocket, the whole deal. But I remember we were at the Action Sports trade show in San Diego, and they had a big old demo ramp out there. And I'd never seen Christian skate in real life. You just saw lots of videos. And back then, too, the videos you barely even saw because we were so young and it was so new. But he dropped into a ramp, and it was just a regular, 12-foot half pipe. And the first air, he went probably 24 feet across this 30-foot ramp, like from edge to edge, and like 8 feet high. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Everything he hit went bigger until he crashed. So like, that guy is exactly what I want to be like. Nice. Go until you crash. And same with Lester. Lester Kasai would drop in and just gyrate airs until he was higher than he could handle. And it was so fun to watch him skate like that, and then get all tweaked out, do big old methods, Japan airs, and it was so cool.
Yeah, I really honestly don't think that anybody stood out in snowboarding like you did until Mike Michalchuk. And then he had a similar thing. He got his Achilles tendon got cut, and then that was it. He was done.
Yeah. It sucks when you go from being invincible to all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm human and I can't do shit now. Because I used to hit jumps with so much power, like I couldn't get high enough. Like I would gyrate speed off of every little bump to get to that jump to get more air. And then it was like, oh, a little bit pussy, and I'm going to hit this jump a little softer. And I was just like, what happened to me, you know?
Yeah, so you're the
And
kind
thank
of
God
guy
I did it.
that you were going full blast for so long that going half speed just wasn't in the cards for you. It just wasn't as fun.
Yeah. It was like being a drug addict and then getting sober. Like, all the time. Yeah, okay, well, it's still life, but it sure is boring. Like 96 on is when I was completely out of the snowboard world.
And did you miss it?
No, and I miss being physical like that. I was still riding motorcycles and skateboards, but I was having so much fun with this club, and it was a whole different world. Like, it was the equivalent of being on the top of the snowboard world, because our club was the biggest in America, and we were traveling to different cities, and just like a completely different energy. And I had never experienced, you know, we were kind of creating a whole new club genre as we were going along. So it was like snowboarding that rush all over again. It's just in a whole different world.
You found a whole other new thing.
Yeah.
You were able to keep that stoke going.
Yeah, exactly. I would. Yeah, I do. I'm glad I didn't have to hermit up and just wish I was still part of that sport that I used to be part of.
It was so hard. In those in-between years when snowboarding was not paying any respect to its roots.
Yeah, it felt like that. It felt like we were forgotten for a while there. Like the sport had gone in a weird direction, and it's like, fuck you guys then. You know, we'll go do our other thing. And,
right.
You know, I totally felt like that. Like all I was known for was fluorescent clothes, and I'm like, there was a lot more to my life than fluorescent clothes.
Right. Everyone was in fluorescent clothes. Like Rank was in fluorescent clothes. Come on, give me
a Like I said, it all came full circle. Just, you know, I'd say about 7 years ago when Facebook started, you know, creating all these little sub-sites, and you were like part of the Snowboard in Exile group or something, and then it was like this whole revival of snowboarding, and then they started realizing their elders basically like started showing some respect.
I'm glad that you don't feel like you've been forgotten, and I really hope that you don't feel like Neon was your legacy, man.
No, that's what's really come around lately. Is everybody's been really respectful and really talking about the actual riding technique and talent, you know, that we had back then, especially for the archaic products we were on compared to now.
You created a genre.
Yes. So it became very like Alaska Extreme, and then now today you've got things like the Art of Flight, which is just a mind-blowing video to watch what these guys can do off of a huge. You know, they'll be like bouncing down cliffs and then throw a 720 in the middle of the mix, you know, which is exactly what we were trying to do. Just we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Well, they didn't invent that. What they invented was like a beautiful way of filming it. You know what I mean? You guys invented that, and then they definitely perfected it. I mean, God, they're so good.
They're so damn good. Like when I watched all those guys, that video I've watched 100 times, and not only does the soundtrack make you feel like you're there and give you all that energy, but just to watch them hit those jumps in the super slow motion, and you can see every little detail of their grab and stuff, and they're so damn good. Unbelievable.
What was it like being Damian Sanders at the top of a jump, like the in-run for a jump? Like what was going through?
That's when I never felt better. Like when I was looking down and I knew I was going to go higher than everybody else, and I knew I had the talent to do it. That was some of the best moments of my life. Like just because all I wanted to do was show off. I just wanted everybody to go, "Holy shit! Did you see that kid?" You know. And I basically killed myself doing it. I mean, it was all about for me. I could care less about the contest. It was just, could I get higher than everybody else and have everybody tell me how high I went. Oh, it was so fun. Back in the day, like at a Squaw Valley half-pipe contest, there was like 2 hits in a whole pipe that were even worth hitting. The rest of it was just getting speed for those 2 hits. So we would sit there, like strap on our boards, drop in, hit one giant hit. If you made it, you were stoked, and then you hit the second wall. But it was like get that shot, you know, 12 feet out, and that's all that mattered. It was not like it is now where you have to put together 10 flawless hits. It was like you got one big jump in the half pipe and you might win.
Right. And so there was never a time, like you can imagine now, where there was somebody at the top, like a coach or a buddy that's going, like, hey, buddy, you got to go, you know, hike up 10 feet higher. And you were like, I don't know, man. Like,
never.
Not ever. I love it.
I remember everybody strapping in, and I'd go 15, 20 feet higher than them to strap in, and they'd be like, "What are you doing up there?" And then I would just bomb it. That's all I could get. Every ounce of like transition speed I could, you know, gyrate out of that sucker to get a bigger air was all I wanted to do. And I came down on the flat top and in the flat bottom. I was just all over the court. I mean, way more balls than talent, and so it's just how high can I get?
But it all came
and I never
in
more alive.
Yeah, it all.
Yeah, it all came together in shifty editing, so it looks like we're hitting the same jump, and like, it cracks me up. Like they'll film a front side 360, and then the landing is from a backside 360 because you know they clipped it. Like somehow you change direction mid-flight. And that's what, to this day, I never stuck a double backflip, and it drives me crazy. Like, I don't know how many times I tried, and how many times I came out right on my feet and it ate shit because I was, like, so amazed that I made it around. But, like, Steve Graham stuck a few of them and just actually rode away with his hands up, you know. And that's what I even like that one big one in Snowboards in Exile. I came down right on my feet, and then I turned, like, to the backside and ate shit for no reason.
Yeah, you can see that you're coming down and you just got like you're going to go 90.
Yeah, all I had to do was freaking land it and right away. But I was like so freaking amazed because when I did it, I didn't have any control over that. I was just hucking and hoping I came out on my feet. Right. And I kind of like judged, okay, if I go this much faster, I think I'll land on my feet. And so I was never like, okay, lay tuck. It was just like huck it and wait. And so when I actually came out on my feet, it was like the world was a blur and just ate shit. So it was going so fast at the time. So.
That's incredible.
God, it was funny though.
So seeing these guys with double corks, triple corks, and quad corks.
Yeah, even quad corks.
Do you watch that
I think I've watched that quad. I watched that quad cork video that was on recently. I must have watched it 1,000 times just because the way he stalled out that last one was that feeling that I had on so many jumps. Like he did that quad cork, and after 3, you're like, oh shit, he's going for another one, and then he just was able to stall it out. And I used to do that with my backflips. I'd lay it out when I was doing a single, and it was amazing feeling. So I couldn't imagine what he must feel like doing 4. I mean, just mind blowing. And it was just so flawless and phenomenal. It brought back so many memories for me. Like the feeling I got watching that was like I was there again. So cool. I mean, you know, when you used to see the skiers get ready for their big triple cork things back in the day, or their triple twisted backflips, and they would run through it in their head, and they were like having a seizure on the mountain before they hit the jump. You know, with their eyes closed. You know, you're like, that is such a different world from what we would just like. Okay, I'm just going to hit it with speed and huck. And so that's kind of what snowboarding has become. It's become. You can actually run through this in your head, and you know if you leave on this heel at this trajectory, you're going to do 3. And just nuts.
I used to think Travis Rice was just hucking. The guy's got to.
See, I'd only heard his name a few times, and then when I saw Art of Flight, you know, is when I first really was introduced to who Travis Rice is, because I was so out of the scene. I wasn't paying attention, and so when I saw that, I was like, who the hell is this guy? And all those guys were phenomenal, but he just had a power about him.
Yeah, he stands out.
Cool.
That's who you were. That's who you were to me in 1990.
Oh, that's cool. Thanks. That's awesome.
Like the unobtainable. There was everybody else in there, you know. I was like, I could probably be as good as Dave Cioni. I think I could get a sponsorship, you know. Jeez. But there's no chance in hell that I would ever be a Damian Sanders. It's not
That's awesome. Oh, that's so cool. Right on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with me.
It was a pleasure. I had a little nostalgia there.
Yeah, dude.
Okay, thank you. Talk to you soon.
Yeah,
thanks.
Bye.
It's been a fucking rad snowboarding season this year, and this podcast has been a hell of a lot of fun to produce. We're gaining traction and watching the numbers of downloads grow every week, but honestly, it's so much fun to do it. I'd do it even if there was only a handful of hardcores listening. For real. I'm learning as I go, and I hope you agree the episodes keep getting better as I figure out my shit and get more confident putting my voice in the things. Thanks to all the listeners out there. You know, next season we're going to have more in-depth interviews with a bunch more amazing snowboarders from the early days of snowboarding. We've confirmed with guys like Mike Olson, Terry Kidwell, and I just got a message from my buddy Mike that he can put me in touch with Jamie Lynn. Right? Speaking of Mike, I want to start the FNRad shoutouts by thanking Strats for the Vans High Standard boots he hooked me up with. They're super rad. Also, big thanks to Jay Hilton for the ride boots and gear, as well as hooking me up with K2 demo boards and bindings. I have a feeling listeners of our show would love the K2 87 I rode this week. It's next year's model. It's got a rad shape and it's fun as fuck. Also, check out the short, fat, swallow-tailed Cool Bean. And go to the K2 website to check that stuff out. Thanks to Ricky Hauer and John Burton at Timberline, and especially huge thanks to all the people we did interviews with this season. We may put a couple off-season bonus episodes out over the summer, so check in with us from time to time on the FNRad snowboarding page on Facebook. That's actually a great place to get in touch with us if you got something to say. Season 2 will launch the first week of December 2016, and our first episode will be with the one and only Russell Winfield. You know, kind of like Kid Welded Damian for Season 1.
Yeah, I'm definitely Season 2 then. Because I came out the same year as Teddy and Jamie.
Okay.
And then the next year was like Rayberg and all them dudes.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast, brought to you by BR Productions.